So there was this story back at sort of June time, I believe, that Muslim millionaire gives major donation to Reform UK. And this Muslim millionaire goes by the name of Zaya Yusuf. And he is a tech entrepreneur, and he donated £200,000, as I'm aware. It's always difficult to tell. But I did a little bit of digging, and I think that's the amount he donated, which is not exactly a small amount, particularly to a budding party. This is the first election, as with Nigel at the helm of Reform UK, that has happened. And so they needed that money, I think. Mm-hmm. I think that's fair to say. And Mr. Yusuf actually said, the party leadership feel very strongly that we should protect British values and put British people of all religions and creeds first. And this, somewhat uncontroversial statement, did set off some alarm bells because it was wrapped up in the language of multiculturalism. And of course, I don't believe in the law discriminating against people, of course. However, when someone wraps up language in that way, it seems to suggest that perhaps your dedication to ending things like mass immigration, for example, is not as strong as someone else. And it is worth also mentioning as well that in the Reform Manifesto, it's an oft overlooked part, but Bo Dade, a former Reform candidate that was one of the purged candidates, our very own Bo, put me onto the fact that there was a part in there that said ban Sharia law. Not sure how that was going to happen, but it seems like a little bit of a juxtaposition when you have a Muslim coming in, although I don't necessarily think he's joining the Mujahideen or ISIS anytime soon. I don't think he's that kind of Muslim, to his credit, I suppose. But they have mopped up a fair amount of money leading up to the election. This story, I believe, was from 3 days ago, and they got about £600,000 in 1 week's donations, which is quite good, really, for a party of their size. But I was somewhat disappointed by this. This is what led me to cover this, really. I saw Ben Habib share on Twitter this message, and I'll read it and then we'll talk about what we actually think of it. I've just been informed by Nigel Farage that Richard Tice is taking over as deputy leader of the party. Consequently, I no longer hold that position. I'm considering my position more generally in light of this change. I have long held concerns about the control of the party and the decision-making process. I'll reflect on all of this. The key for me is that Reform UK stays true to the promises made to the British people. The movement we have created does not belong to us, it belongs to the people. We are obliged and indebted to the British people. So, first and foremost, Godfrey, what do you make of this?
Well, there's an awful lot of stuff I don't know. There's a lot I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to flag that up straight away. I'm not in the know. I'm not behind the scenes on this at all.
Of course, and neither am I, for that matter.
But I would say, as a almost founder member of UKIP years ago, this surprises me not. Ben Habib is now a member of a very big club. And if you remember, UKIP started with, in 2004, I think it was, with something like 11 MEPs. And when they finished that session, it went down to 5 MEPs. And then the next session started in 2009, I think it was. And the UKIP members were, or MEPs were 14 and finished with 5. Nigel he's very articulate and he's a good platform performer. And he has a lot of political nous, but every now and again drops the pass. And I fancy this is a dropped pass. It's a problem that we saw in UKIP, and it looks like it might go the same way. Nigel's idea of management is based on Stalin, Joseph Stalin management. And if anybody sort of gets in your way, it's the gulag for you. And I suspect there's probably more to this than meets the eye, because Ben Habib is an articulate, intellectual, well-read individual. And Joe Stalin would have certainly got rid of him on that basis alone. You don't want people... And it reminds me of Julius Caesar a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember, I'm going from my Shakespeare interpretation of Julius Caesar. when he complained that he was surrounded by thin men and he wanted fat men around him. He trusted fat men. He didn't trust thin men. And I think we've got a sort of a game here that there's a lack of trust in somebody who's looking a bit too clever, a bit too sharp, a bit too erudite, a bit too articulate.
Mhm.
And maybe he might take the spotlight off the leadership. And that was very much the UKIP game. That's how it happened. It could be that, because taking you up on the point of the £200,000 donation to Reform, by modern standards, that really isn't very much. I mean, I could write a check for 200,000. It wouldn't please my wife. She would want to spend it on booze and horses. But it's not a big sum by modern standards, really. Not really.
I suppose so. And my concern is that, as we're going to get onto later, that it's almost like a return to the 19th century of buying commissions in the military.
Yes, buying commissions. And if you actually study your military history, which I have, of course, I'm a military historian, you didn't get particularly many bigger dummies, whether they bought it or they didn't. I mean, of course, there was no buying your commissions, and the generals we got, broadly speaking, the First War were pretty rubbish,
Yes.
And so on and so forth. So it doesn't always necessarily follow. But I think perhaps a nearer analogy here would be Lloyd George's sale of honours. Lord Lloyd George, the overt sale of honours. I mean, it's always been going on, that sort of thing, but Lloyd George didn't even bother to hide it. And I think that's really what we're dealing with. But 200,000, I don't know. Has Reform sold its soul for a mess of pottage?
Seems like it may have, actually. Certainly Ben Habib is no Mark Antony, is he? Lewis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, echoing what Godfrey said about Ben Habib being very articulate. He's very popular as well. I mean, this post has generated 3.3 million views alone, 7.7 thousand likes as well. Ben Habib has always been, I think, one of the favourites within Reform, just as a candidate, as someone who can get his point across very eloquently, very straight to the point. So I'm sensing a kind of, it's stealing the limelight a bit off of certain few, whether it be a candidate or whether it be a leader of this particular party. So, like I said, I think we don't know the behind the scenes of what's going on. I'm very disappointed, actually, is the honest truth. I'm disappointed that Ben Habib wasn't elected, which is gutting, because I think he would be a fantastic candidate and leader. So I guess there's the looming threat there. And on top of that, I'm gutted that they've decided to demote him just on the basis that I believe he wasn't elected, and that's probably the decision that they decided to make, because he's not within Parliament. He's not got that limelight that the rest of them do with Lee Anderson and this new guy as well that was elected in Ashfield. Was it Ashfield and the new guy, the one that was late?
Yeah, Basildon.
Basildon, that's
the
right,
one.
yeah.
Place.
That's the one. Yeah. I've got a mate that lives there, actually.
Oh, there we are.
And that echoes that, yeah. So yeah, I'm gutted for him personally, but I'm sure that there is more to this than meets the eye, and I'm sure we're going to hear a bit more very soon.
I would imagine so, yes. And as you were saying, he's well regarded amongst Reform voters, and I think that we need only look across the Atlantic to one of Nigel Farage's friends, I suppose you can call him, Donald Trump, and he takes a very similar line of he likes to have people under him that are quite understated, that will not outshine. Yeah. So he likes people who not necessarily are the most articulate speakers, because he likes to hold that position for himself. And it might be that, in fact, he's been talking to Trump and exchanging political strategies with him, because, of course, he's been over there and helping him campaign at some point. And this is one of the things that Trump might have suggested he do.
Yeah,
I think it's a very big mistake. I was just telling Lewis before we went on air, when I was in the army, which is a long time ago, with bows and arrows and stuff like that, really. But I used to surround, when I was a squadron commander or a platoon commander, whatever the rank I happened to get to eventually, The reason I managed to get to field rank eventually was because because I picked the best corporals and the best sergeants I could possibly get hold of to cover my arse. And you need, if you're going to be a team, you need the best people around you. It doesn't detract from you at all. It actually enhances you as the leader. Gosh, he knows how to pick good men. And we had a general inspection once. General Learman, well-known general at the time, inspected my training squadron, and he said, this is one of the best training squadrons I've ever seen. I said, well, it's nothing really to do with me. We better meet my sergeant major. Introduced to my sergeant major. And of course, people think there are officers and managers who think that detracts from your situation. It doesn't, because General Learman got in the car, and when he went back to command headquarters, wherever he went back to, he wants people who know how to pick good people.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I think if you do that, you move forward very quickly. And we had this problem in UKIP where Nigel insisted that you could not be a spokesman for UKIP on TV or anywhere else, basically, unless you were an MEP, an elected MEP. Well, first time round, our MEPs were fairly Van Ordinaire, to be frank. Hearts in the right place, good people. But we had recently retired naval captains, very recently retired, who could have spoken on defence. We had a keen UKIPper who was a surgeon, young surgeon in Edinburgh, and so on. And so we had some really top, but they weren't elected MEPs. They were just very good people, and we should have fielded them. But again, always reminds me years ago of the Evening Standard cartoon, and you won't have anybody watching this who will remember that. It goes back quite a long way. And there was JJ, the column was JJ, and he was a fat cigar-smoking businessman, CEO, and his secretary was called Miss Finch, and he had one of those little buzz-throughs, and he flicked through it, and he said, Miss Finch, he said, I want you to trawl through the organisation and find somebody who's bright, attractive, competent, somebody who's capable of taking my place, and sack him. And that's what I smell. That's what I smell.
Fair play. Yeah.
So we have actually spoke to Ben Habib before. He spoke to Bo while he was still a candidate for reform, before Tice purged him, thanks to Hope Not Hate. And so if you want to hear him speak for himself, this is a good place to go. It is free. You don't have to pay for it. It is a full interview, and I feel like it's certainly worth watching. But Carl, my boss, posted a video in support of Ben Habib, in which Ben Habib thanked Carl.
Oh, that's nice.
Which I think is nice, because Carl basically said much the same as we've said, of he's worked hard, and he doesn't necessarily deserve to be treated in this way, because he's well regarded by reform voters, and it seems a little bit unfair.
He's the one you want. He's the one you want surrounding everyone. He's I'm a bit biased, but he's the most articulate out of all of them. So he's like the gold dust from all of these guys. He's the one that you would pick to have as either an advisor or someone to lead in that regard. So I
he's also
understand.
He's better than, he's not just the best that reform can offer, Ben Habib, but I would argue that he's the best any political party can offer at this moment.
I agree.
And you can't do every TV, every question time, any questions. You've got to spread it around. What will happen, and this happened last time in 2014, you can't go into a national election without a shadow cabinet or suggested shadow cabinet, which is what UKIP did in 2014 when I was, after I'd left, and I explained to Andrew Neil, and it's on my website, that you can't, being a protest group is one thing, and Nigel's extremely good at being a protest vote, bang, bang, banging the drum and all that kind of thing. That's very good. But in 4 or 5 years, it's not impossible that reform could be looking to be HM opposition, I would suggest, perhaps. And the first question is going to be, where's your shadow cabinet? And the answer is nowhere. It's bang, 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 let's all go to the pub. That works in certain types of party. It worked in European first politics, which was proportional representation. It doesn't work when you go to the country.
It's very true.
And it looks to me possibly like there's a lesson that hasn't been learned.
I agree.
And I think that this decision has, if the National is to be believed here, potentially distanced Habib from the party, understandably. I certainly don't blame him for potentially considering resigning. And there's a part in here, I can't quite remember where it was, but yes, they're talking about the criticism and things like that. But obviously, we still need to wait and see what he actually has to say for himself in greater detail.
I was going to say, that part shines the most. The key for me is that Reform UK stays true to the promises made to the British people. The movement we have created does not belong to us, it belongs to the people. We are obliged and indebted to the British people.
And I think
we need to hear more of that. And the fact that Habib has just outright said that, I think it speaks volumes to character and intention, because trust, I mean, I'm very cynical as it is with regards to politics or politicians. So
wait till you get to my age and see how cynical you are.
Yeah, it's only going to increase. So to actually hear that is extremely refreshing, and we need more of that. So I can't wrap my head around this. I'm really sorry. I can't do it.
Yeah. So we look at Yusuf's post here. It is an honour to be appointed chairman of Reform UK against all odds under Nigel Farage, and he talks about their electoral successes. This is just the beginning, an important work of professionalising the party, which I think is an interesting word there. Building national infrastructure and continuing to grow membership has already begun. I will bring all my expertise, energy and passion to the role to ensure we achieve our mission of returning Great Britain to greatness. And yes, if you look beneath this, you can see lots of people rather upset about this decision. There's one person there saying, "You are such a gentleman," to give him his credit. And yes, people are giving him a hard time, which is very different to what you might get for Ben Habib's post, where people are actually being quite supportive. And I think that this is a great way to alienate your potential base, really.
I remember the professionalization of UKIP, which actually meant dumping the grassroots. That was a euphemism for dumping the grassroots, which was the whole strength of the party was grassroots. Professionalize it. And what we did, we got people, wannabes who couldn't make it in the Conservative Party, who came in, parachuted in. We got people who were sort of gurus of this, that, and the other on 50 grand a year or whatever it was. And I'm trying to get 10 quid out of old age pensioners in Yorkshire. And the next time, you go, "Where's old so-and-so gone?" He goes, "No, he was an idiot. He's gone." I go, "Oh." Suddenly gone. Professionalizing a political party, in my view, is a bad thing. It's a bad thing. Yep. We have too many professional bloody parties all over the place with their hand in the till, taking no notice of the electorate. I wouldn't professionalize it, but I wouldn't make, what I think perceived mistakes such as this. One very quick thing, I must say, I had a first generation Pakistani commanding officer, regimental commanding officer. He was absolutely fantastic, and he had the Union Jack on his bloody underpants. He was a really patriotic, straight guy. So I'm quite sure that this guy's straight. I just think it's not been done right.
I think just the idea of just buying your way into the chairman, the appointed chairman, is just, I don't know. I think it kind of shows, I don't know, a bit of light on how things operate there.
Well, the thing is, though, because Ben Habib himself is half Pakistani, and so if Farage were trying to counter the accusations you get from BBC types of is your party racist? Are the people that belong to your party racist? Well, this decision wouldn't necessarily make sense because Ben Habib is already there and well regarded. And so it doesn't make sense. And so the only interpretation I can really come up with, unless there's something a bit more complicated internal, I'm not privy to everything, is that this was, a cynical move as a reward for donation.
Exactly. And your enemies are always going to call you ists and phobes and isms.
You can't deal with that. Yeah,
you can't get away.
That. Don't play that. I said to Andrew Neil, don't play that race card with me.
Exactly. And the Tory party and the Labour Party are essentially the same party with the same crux of identity politics, ESG, DEI. You want to stray away from that. If someone, they're always going to call you the ists and isms. So why are you playing the same game? don't understand it.
Well, it's defending yourself on their home turf, really, isn't it? And you shouldn't
Don't need to
concede
do
the
it.
framing. You know, if you defend yourself via their paradigm, you've already conceded too much ground.
Exactly.
But you also have the same effect here, where the Reform Party announced Zahir Yusuf as chairman, and yeah, one of the top comments: complete betrayal, embarrassing. It's a lady with a Palestinian flag saying we want to kick the Muslims out, which dear, that's a bit of a contradiction there. But there we go. And then finally, I did want to mention that he did give a speech at a rally for reform on the 30th of June, and his speech did go down well with the base. It roused the crowd a bit, and he's clearly a good speaker, at least, and I agreed with some of his points. But I feel like some of the framing of what he was saying was slightly off. I think that he was talking very much in the abstract about British values, but not very much about the British people. And I think that many of the people in Reform are concerned about the British people, because, you know, you get British values by having the British people. That is sort of indisputable, really. And so I think that it causes some reason to be a little bit cautious about this, because I think that it could be a potential means in which Reform's stance on things like immigration could be softened because it's wrapped up in values. And of course, he talks about people of any culture, of any religion and things like that. And that, to me, sounds like something out of the Conservative Party, if I'm being completely honest. And it is not why people voted Reform. It's not why I voted Reform, begrudgingly, albeit. And it's quite frustrating, really. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see more of what we're doing, you can check out our election night live stream talking all about the UK election. It was a behemoth 10 hours, and you can watch us slowly unravel. And if you want to see all of the other work we're doing, we post links to everything that we're releasing on our Twitter. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.